So my name is Christopher Chedeau, and I'm also known as Visual on the internet. And this is I'm so excited to be here because I went to California for 3 years to work at Facebook, and I cannot believe that there's 700 people right here in Paris interested in React. So this is crazy. So I think the best part to me about React is, unlike many projects, there's not one person that drives React, but there's many people, and there's, I think, a real community of people around React. And so Dan Abramov made what he called his React list, and all the people that he mentioned can barely fit on a slide, and he also had description for many of them, and I actually tried to take a screenshot of the entire post, but it overflowed the actual limit size of the JPEG format, which is crazy. So why are we all here? So the reason is React. So when we open sourced it, it was only the view part. We branded it as the V in MVC. But when you think about it, React actually transformed the way we think about building apps and the way we design those. So now we are going to start by building the view first. And we are now focusing on the user interface first. And so what we realized is that by focusing on the view and with the React model, actually the C and the M in the MVC tend to be written in a very different way. So what I'm going to try to do with this keynote is to go over all the parts of the React ecosystem and try to summarize the big trends and where everything is going. Because it can be challenging, there's so many things going on that it's easy to get lost if you just enter the field. So we're going to focus on 4 major areas. So the first one is data. The second one is language, then packager, and finally the targets. So the data part is so when we open sourced React 2 years ago, we didn't provide any way to manage your data. We didn't give any recommendation, and almost to a fault. It was really hard because we didn't know, and so people were asking every time. And so 1 year later, one of our engineers was fed up with all of those questions and decided to document the way we do it internally using the Flux architecture. And the big idea of Flux is one-way data flow. And what happened is a bit crazy. The day he put the blog post, which was really small, everyone got so excited in the React community, and we've seen a tremendous amount of Flux libraries. And so you may think that this is actually a bad thing. Now, if you're starting, which Flux library do I use? Do you use McFly or Barracks or Reflux or Redux? So many libraries, and it can be confusing. But the way I see it is as a good thing. So I don't know if a lot of you have studied machine learning, but there's a fascinating algorithm which is called simulated annealing. And it comes from the physical world with annealing, which is annealing. And the way it works is, so if you're you have a huge search space. So in our case, what is the best way to implement Flux, for example? Then you want to search for the best possible option. So the way it works is you're going to start with a very high temperature. And all the molecules are going to go super fast. And in the Flux world, innovation is going to be, there's going to be so many experiments and projects and everything going on. And then you're going to slowly decrease the temperature. And when you decrease the temperature, molecules are going to move slower and slower. And so all the craziest ideas, they're going to die, or we are not going to go there. And then only the crazy ideas, and now we're going to converge to something that is actually really good. And so we are seeing this like innovation phase happening with Flux right now because like a few like Flux libraries are starting to die, some are starting to merge together. And I'm pretty sure that if we wait like for a few months, like we're going to see a trend where like they're going to converge towards the optimal point. And so this is like the way we found how to manage data that's inside of your application. But now, the other part is how do you actually fetch this data? And on this question, like the first big question is, when do you fetch data? Like, because you can do it at many times, but like, when do you do it? And it turns out that the router is a big part of this question, because if you think about it, when you're transitioning to a new route, you need to fetch data for that route. So data fetching goes very hand in hand with the router. And the router also gives us the framework in order to like implement server-side rendering. And so on this part, we've seen actually only one player emerge, which is React Router. And so now, if you think back about my analogy of like innovation, like we've only seen one player. Like, is there any innovation going on? Like, what's going on? But the reality is that innovation already happened a few years before. And it happened in the Ember community. And so React Router like basically imported like all the good ideas of the Ember router and embedded it inside of React. And so this is like one of the strengths of React and the React community is that we are not afraid of taking good ideas from other frameworks and other libraries in order to make like the entire ecosystem better. So the next part about like data management and data fetching is like about like immutability. So we've known for like the longest time in computer science that immutability gives like a lot of benefits, but actually like no one really applied immutability to like the front end. Like how do you use it for UIs? And what's interesting is that the ClojureScript community actually like told us and like made proof of concept and like actually showed us that it worked to use immutability in order to speed up our like React apps by implementing should component updates. And also it gives us like a lot of benefits. Like now you can record all of your actions, you can do undo and like all of this that it's really hard to do in a mutable world. So the next part is about how do you, like what data do you want to fetch? And we're seeing a trend, like we're seeing like a lot of players coming in the field, and we are seeing a trend where the component is actually the unit of your application. And we've seen, like when we open source React, it was like we're going to put the markup and the logic in the component. And with React Native, we've seen like we're going to put the styles. And now the trend is we're going to put the data dependencies inside of the component. And so we're seeing like 4 different projects and probably many more I don't know about, like Relay and GraphQL, Falcon and JSON Graph, Flux over the wire, and Home next, that are all embrace this idea. And so this is where we are today, like with data management and data fetching. But there's I think there's 2 big things that are not yet being embraced by the React ecosystem. And the 2 of them is real-time and persistence. So you may wonder why those 2 and like are they really why those 2 are bucketed together. And when you think about it, they are both about managing state. So in order to implement real-time, the server needs to know some of the state of your client in order to know what data to update, to send it to him. And if you think about persistence, it's actually the client that holds some state of the server. And the reason why I think that React is has a really good opportunity to solve this problem is because React is all about state management. And we've built all the React ecosystem around it. And I'm pretty sure we can find some really nice abstractions in order to solve those 2 very hard challenges. So this is the data part, but in order to actually use React, we need to use like JavaScript the language. And so for the longest time so the way the language landscape of JavaScript evolved is super interesting. So before React, the big player in the language space has been CoffeeScript. And they showed us that we can actually use JavaScript as a compile target and add a lot of syntax elements and really nice features on top of it. And on the other side, inside of Facebook, we've been using JS Transform. And we use it for implementing JSX, but also implementing all our internationalization pipeline and things like this. And those two projects really pushed the web forward in order to think of JavaScript as a compile target. But they were only the first step. So the next step was to actually embrace all of those things and put them back inside of JavaScript, the standards. And so we've seen the TC39 standard committee has been extremely active and has taken all the good ideas of CoffeeScript and many places and actually standardized them. And in order to be able to standardize things on the web, we need to be able to polyfill those. We need to be able to try them out before we actually standardize them in order to make sure they are really good. And the way, the two big projects around this were Tracer and Recast. And then, there's a new player that came in and basically, took off like crazy, which is Babel. And, I don't know about you, but, I'm a big fan of Babel. And at Facebook, we already started converting React and React Native to Babel, and we're in the process of converting, the entire Facebook JavaScript code base to Babel. And so I think the biggest point about Babel is it lets you extremely easily prototype with new features and new language extensions. And we need this for making a better JavaScript. So what do we get from ES6 or ES 2015, as it's called now? We got, I think there's three big categories of new features. So the first one is exemplified by arrow functions. And the idea is that we're going to add some sugar, but we're also going to fix JavaScript. So when you're using arrow function, the this is now correctly set. And arguments is now a real array and everything. The second part is classes. So every single library on Earth re-implements their own flavor of classes. And it's actually really good to be able to have a standard way to do it. And finally, there's those crazy language features like async await, which are basically compiling your code into something very different to introduce new features. And so this is only the beginning, and I'm sure that we're going to see really cool experiments going on in the JavaScript space. So you don't only need JavaScript like a transpiler. You also need a lot of tools around it in order to help write JavaScript. And ESLint is my favorite linter, where you can write rules against the AST in order to prevent people from making mistakes all over the place. But linters are not enough. So this is a tweet from Hadi Osmani, where he mentioned that now Chrome is improving the undefined is not a function error message. And so this is a really good change, and this is the most number of retweets I've seen in a JavaScript tweet ever. And please, someone can someone retweet it? We need to be 3,000. And so, but this is only helping the error message, but can we actually fix this error, undefined is not a function? What does it mean? It means that you're actually calling a method on something that can be null. And it shouldn't happen in practice. You should know that your thing can be null and do a if check. And we need tools in order to be to let us catch those errors, especially as our code base grows. And we've seen like two really big projects around this, which add gradual typing to the language, which are TypeScript and Flow. And the idea is that you're only going to type things that you want safety on, but you can still use any untyped JavaScript wherever you want. So again, this is where we are today, but we can do so much better. So I have a dream where we reuse JavaScript as a language target, and in order to be able to do optimizing transpiler. So we have Flow or TypeScript, which adds type annotation. We have Babel that lets us generate code. So could we combine the two together in order to output some really optimized code? And could we output WebAssembly or ASM.js to get rid of the JIT and have the absolute highest performance possible? Or could we implement some language features like immutable data structure directly inside of the language? And so I'm super stoked about the future of JavaScript and in order for expressivity and performance. So, but when you're writing JavaScript on all of these features, you actually need to package them up. So what is the landscape of packager in JavaScript? So the first big revolution in the JavaScript environment is nodejs. And they gave us two things. So the first one is CommonJS. It's basically a way to express dependencies in your app. And now, we don't need to use global variables anymore. Not everything links by default. This has been so good. And combined with NPM, you can actually share all of those modules to use. And this really exploded the number of active projects. And this really have been extremely helpful for the JS ecosystem. But this has all been developed for Node.js. And we actually more, at least at Facebook, we're more interested in the browser. We want to send those to the browser. So what are the tools to let you do that? So the big ones are Browserify and Webpack. And they've done a tremendous amount of work to take those Node modules and bring them to the browser. But at the same time, they also introduce a compile step. And if you program in any language, the biggest hurdle for developer velocity is a compile step. And yesterday during the hackathon, I've seen people for a small one-day project have a 5-second web update time. And someone that presented was spent one entire minute running his gulp toolchain. And this is not good. We went to the web because of the super fast iteration cycle. And I really don't want to go back to having to wait for the compiler. So how do we actually get better performance on this? So the first big thing is incremental updates. So whenever a file changes, we want to automatically watch for this file and start recompiling before the user even clicks reloads. And we shouldn't have to recompile the entire world every time. And the second one is how do you send this to the browser? And so the solution for this is we cannot minify everything into a single file. We need to be able to split it into many different files and only send to the client what it needs. And we also need to be able to find a way to manage updates because we're trying to push the code and we need to manage and make sure you're always running the most up-to-date code. And so there's a lot of opportunities in this area, and I really want the entire community to not accept the status quo of having to wait for tens of seconds on every change. My ideal vision for this is I want less than a second update on every time you save a file. And I'm super excited about a project like React Hot Loader that not only lets you update the file in real time, but also they keep the state of your app intact. So you can actually modify things live without reloading. So this is where I want like the community to go, and we have to invest in this. So I've talked a lot about the browser as a target, but React has been designed with the virtual DOM in mind. And we started with a DOM, and people experimenting with SVG and Canvas, and there's even a talk today about using React to render terminal apps, which is like mind-blowing to me. But like, what is the big picture? So right now we live in a world where we cannot only build web apps, especially if you target mobile. We have to develop iOS and Android apps. And this is a big pain for like the community, because when you were able to have like one developer being able to like write something and ship it to all of the users, now you got to have 3 developers, and like it increased overhead, and now you got to that one developer needs also to convince the other 2 to implement the same feature, and like this is not an ideal state, and we absolutely need to find a way to fix it. And so the way we've been trying to do it at Facebook is using the React Native projects. And so there are 2 goals for the project. So the first one is we want to have the user experience of a native app. So this is like extremely important, and like we cannot lower our bar. Like we absolutely have to be the best in class. And if you're giving a React Native app or any app to the user, they shouldn't be able to tell like this is a web view or this is a web app. And I really want to believe that we can do it. And the next part, which is actually like never mentioned in any talk, is the developer experience. So if you're if you want to help me out, like please start using the DX sign for like really showing people that we care about developer experience, and like this is a fundamental thing that we want to push with React. And I actually believe that they both go hand in hand. Because if you have a good developer experience, a good developer velocity, then you're able to much easily write a good user experience. So we announced React Native a few months ago, and what's the status of the project? So I'm going to give you like a use case study that we have inside of Facebook of React Native. So there's the ads team that came to us, and they said that they wanted to build an app to manage ads on iOS, but they didn't have any iOS engineer. And they didn't have any iOS expertise. Like there were a few web developers, and the rest was generalist. And like they were a bit stuck because like they couldn't do it, and they would have to train the staff, and they estimated like it would take like 18 months to build the app. And so they started using React Native, and 7 engineers were able to write the app in 5 months. And it's been in the App Store, and like it's really successful. And so this is the part where I think like the user experience is indistinguishable from native. And you should actually try it out. And if you see things that you don't like or don't feel right, please let me know. But now they actually wanted an Android app. And so like the most fascinating fact to me is that the exact same 7 engineers were able to write, to port their app to Android in only 3 months, even as we were like building the infrastructure for React Native Android. And without even trying, they got 87% of code reuse. So how did the conversion go? So what they did was to take the actual React Native iOS code base. And the way we designed it is all the base components like view, image, and text, and the layout can be shared across platforms. And when we started the project, like we didn't know like what should be cross-platform or what shouldn't. And it turns out that every like language or platform has basically the same APIs in order to do layout and views and text. And so it didn't make sense to actually like rebuild it from scratch in a different language. So now this code base, like this part is shared, but you need to be like, what do you need to change? And so what they changed is the entire navigation model. So on the iOS side, like there's a tab at the bottom and there's a drop down at the top. But on the Android side, there's a material design plus icon and there's an Android drawer and like the Android menus. But when you think about it, like everything that's inside of this view like is actually cross-platform. And so it doesn't need to be rewritten. And so our stance on this is learn once, write anywhere. We want you to learn how to use React, how to use this base component, how to use Flexbox. And then you want to be able to write this code anywhere and then be able to use the native components like navigation or switch when they make sense in the platform. So those are the 4 big areas I think are really important in the React ecosystem right now. And what we've seen is that on every single of them, there's a huge, but like huge amount of like research and development and like everything's going well. And this is not only about Facebook anymore. Like those are all the people that are attending this conference, like all the companies that are attending this conference. And like we need to be able to build this together. And so I think like the biggest way we can fail is if we don't work together. And a big example for this is I still see a lot of people saying that, oh yeah, Ember sucks or Angular sucks or web components are terrible. And like, if you are doing this or if you see someone do that, please stop. Like, this is going to kill the community. So if I'm going back to the innovation process example, the way we can actually converge to a good solution and the best solution is like if all of the small projects like talk together and like make sure like the ideas are shared. And if you trash talk like the other project, then you're going to like do like bridge a gap between those communities. And now they're not going to talk together, and now like the ecosystem is not going to go forward. So like right now, like this is incredible. Like we have a shot of like disrupting the entire like industry, and we have the ability to make it like 10x better. So we've heard about like 10x engineers, but like I think like we can actually like build 10x tools that are going to let you write super high quality apps with a good user experience using like a amazingly good developer velocity. And for this, we need to actually work together. So thank you. So we've got actually 2 minutes for questions if anyone's interested. Can you come? Anyone has questions? Yep. I forgot to mention this. So Android, so the way we release open source software at Facebook is we first like use them in production. Like this ensures that the quality is really high and like it's going to work. And then we are going to to open source once we prove that it was worth it. And so right now that we ship the first app, the team is going to focus like really heavily on making it open source. So expect to see it in a few months. Can you get